My name is Clara Vance. I am 32 years old, and on this warm Charleston evening, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and salt water, I am sitting in a quiet corner of the Cypress Room, a place where old Southern money comes to whisper over plates of artfully arranged food. My sister, Amelia, is regarding me with that familiar, pitying smile she reserves for what she considers my life's inadequacies. My father, the retired Honorable Judge Vance, taps a restless rhythm on the starched linen with his impeccably clean fingernails. My mother keeps her expression placid, a carefully composed portrait of Southern grace. They believe they are having dinner with the family disappointment. They have no idea that the quiet woman across the table, the one they think spends her days filing dusty university archives, is an internationally recognized specialist in the recovery of stolen art and artifacts. And they have no idea that a young man who once helped me track a priceless manuscript across Florence is about to bring them their bread basket. Before I tell you how the carefully constructed world of the Vance family shattered and was rebuilt, take a moment to breathe with me. Settle into the story, because it's not just about a secret revealed. It's about the quiet strength of being underestimated and the surprising grace that can be found when the truth finally comes to light. Growing up a Vance in Charleston was to be born into a legacy. Our family home, south of Broad Street, was a testament to this, a pre-revolutionary gem with a double piazza and a walled garden that had been featured in historical society tours. The world of the Vances was one of expectation, tradition, and the quiet, unyielding pressure to maintain a certain standard. Appearances were not just important, they were everything. My older sister, Amelia, was born to fulfill these expectations. She was the family's star, luminous and sharp. Her path was a straight, ascending line, valedictorian at Ashley Hall, Duke for undergrad, then Yale Law. Now, at 35, she was a junior partner at Sloan, Davenport and Finch, one of the most powerful corporate law firms in the city. Every family gathering was an occasion to celebrate her latest multi-million-dollar merger or her appointment to another prestigious board. My younger brother, Daniel, was the modern prodigy. He was the tech wunderkind who, instead of following the traditional Vance path of law or medicine, had the audacity to become wildly successful in a field our parents barely understood. He sold his first software company to a Silicon Valley giant before he was 30 and was now on his second venture, a darling of the tech press. Father would puff up with pride when introducing my son, the innovator, a phrase that had replaced my son, the future whatever he wants to be. And then there was me, Clara Vance, the quiet middle child, the gentle current in a river of rapids. I chose the College of Charleston for my studies, a decision that was met with polite but profound disappointment. Such a fine mind, Father would muse over his evening bourbon, content to stay in its own backyard. Mother would offer a sympathetic hand squeeze, a silent apology for a world that measured worth in Ivy League degrees and corner offices. After graduation, I told them I'd found a position as an archival assistant at the university library. Well, Mother had said, her voice straining for enthusiasm, it's wonderful that you've found something you enjoy, dear. Father had simply nodded, the conversation already closed. What I didn't tell them, what I couldn't tell them, was that my art history degree and my fluency in Italian and French had flagged me for a very different kind of organization. I hadn't been hired by the library. I had been recruited by the Monuments and Heritage Foundation, a discreet international nonprofit that worked with governments and museums to recover stolen cultural artifacts. The quiet, unassuming archival assistant was a carefully constructed cover for a life of intense research, delicate negotiations, and occasional high-stakes fieldwork. My filing involved tracing the provenance of a stolen Rembrandt. My archiving was coordinating with Interpol to intercept a black market shipment of pre-Columbian pottery. Just last month, I had orchestrated the recovery of the Medici Gospels, a set of illuminated manuscripts valued at over 15 million euros from a private collector in Monaco. The director of the Uffizi Gallery had kissed me on both cheeks and called me a guardian angel of history. That part, of course, was not for public consumption. Why the secrecy? For three simple reasons. The first was professional necessity. The world of high-value art recovery is small and built on discretion. The safety of the artifacts, my informants, and myself often depended on anonymity. The second was my family's well-meaning but ultimately crushing judgment. To them, a job was measured by its title, its salary, and its proximity to power. A career that couldn't be bragged about at the country club was not a career at all. The third reason, I admit with a touch of shame, was a quiet and stubborn pride. There was a certain satisfaction in being the family's gentle failure while secretly living a life of purpose and quiet adventure. While they pitted my meager salary, I was using my considerable hazard bonuses to restore a historic carriage house in a quiet downtown alley, a property I now owned free and clear. Our annual family dinner was the stage for this performance. Once a year, we gathered at Charleston's finest new restaurant, and I would play my part. I would smile and nod through Amelia's triumphs and Daniel's ventures. I would absorb the pity and the gentle condescension. I would be the quiet, unassuming backdrop against which their brilliance shone all the brighter. This year at the Cypress Room was meant to be no different. I had my vague, deflective answers prepared. I would graciously accept Father's inevitable offer to help me find something with a future. I would endure Amelia's not-so-subtle digs about my rented apartment and my 10-year-old car. What I hadn't accounted for was Leo. Leo, the bright, earnest art history intern from Florence who had helped me authenticate the Medici Gospels. I certainly hadn't expected him to be spending his summer working as a sommelier in training at the very restaurant my family had chosen to remind me of my place in the world. The universe, it seems, has a fondness for irony. The Cypress Room was bathed in the soft, golden light of a low-country sunset filtering through antique glass. The air hummed with the quiet clink of silverware on porcelain and the murmur of hushed conversations. Housed in a restored cotton warehouse, the restaurant blended historic brick and heart pine floors with modern, minimalist decor. It was the epitome of Charleston's new elegance, a place that respected its past while charging handsomely for its present. It was, in short, a perfect Vance destination. My habit of punctuality, honed by years of coordinating operations across time zones, meant I arrived a full 15 minutes early. The maitre d', a man whose posture suggested a lifetime of formal service, greeted me with a polite nod. "Vance party for 7:30, I said, smoothing the lines of my simple navy silk dress. It was understated, classic, and more expensive than my family would ever guess. "Of course, madam. The rest of your party has not yet arrived. Would you care to wait at the bar?" I agreed, grateful for a moment to fortify myself. I ordered a glass of Sancerre and watched the light fade over the harbor, mentally rehearsing the familiar script for the evening ahead. They arrived precisely at 7:30, a formidable family unit. Father, in his customary seersucker suit, led the way, followed by Mother, elegant in a linen dress the color of a summer sky. Amelia looked as if she'd stepped from a magazine, her business suit replaced by a chic cocktail dress, not a hair out of place. Daniel, exuding the casual confidence of the tech world, wore a designer shirt with the sleeves artfully rolled up. Trailing them were my Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert, reliable echoes of my parents' worldview. The maitre d' led us to a prime table in a quiet alcove overlooking the garden. I was, as usual, seated at the end, next to Aunt Carol, a position that felt both literal and symbolic. "Clara, dear, you look rested," Aunt Carol said, her tone implying that a lack of ambition was good for one's complexion. "Have you lost weight?" "I don't think so," I replied, a small smile touching my lips. The weight loss was likely the result of a week spent trekking through the Swiss Alps to meet a discreet informant. The opening conversational gambits were as predictable as the tides, the oppressive humidity, the summer tourist traffic, a brief appreciation of the restaurant's ambience. These were the safe shores we visited before sailing into the deeper, more treacherous waters of family status reports. Daniel, never one for subtlety, fired the first salvo after the drinks arrived. "Good news to share," he announced, a grin spreading across his face. "We just closed our Series B funding. 20 million. We're scaling up faster than anyone predicted." A chorus of congratulations erupted. Father clapped him on the shoulder, a rare display of physical affection. "That's my boy. Vision and drive. That's what it takes." Amelia let the excitement settle before making her own announcement, her timing as impeccable as her legal arguments. "Speaking of scaling up," she said, casually examining her wine glass, "Sloan, Davenport and Finch just made me the head of their new intellectual property division. I'll be managing a team of 12 attorneys." More praise followed. To the Vance children, Uncle Robert toasted, lifting his glass. "Continuing the legacy." His gaze flickered past me, as if I were part of the scenery. Then, the inevitable pivot. "And what about you, Clara?" Aunt Carol asked, her voice syrupy with polite obligation. "Still enjoying your work with the old books?" "I am," I said, my answer both true and a monumental understatement. "It must be so peaceful," she replied, with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for a well-tended houseplant. "What is it you do all day, exactly?" Before I could construct a suitably vague response, Mother intervened, her social instincts sensing the potential for awkwardness. "Clara is a wonderful researcher," she said. "So meticulous." I suppressed a smile, thinking of the meticulous research that had involved cross-referencing 17th-century shipping manifests with satellite images of a private estate in Argentina. "How is that little apartment of yours, dear?" Amelia asked, her tone dripping with faux concern. "Still on King Street, above that noisy bakery? I keep telling you, for what you pay in rent, you could get a proper one-bedroom out in West Ashley." "I like my place," I said simply. I didn't mention that my little apartment was a 2-story historic carriage house with a private garden, or that I hadn't paid rent in 3 years. "You know," Amelia continued, warming to her theme, "my firm is looking for a new head paralegal. The work is demanding, but the pay and benefits are excellent. It would be a significant step up for you." Aunt Carol patted my hand. "It's all right, dear. Not everyone is cut out for that kind of high-pressure world. A quiet life has its own rewards." The arrival of the first course, a delicate she crab soup, provided a welcome interruption. As I savored the rich, creamy flavor, I noticed a young man in a sommelier's uniform watching our table. He looked familiar, but in the dim, romantic lighting of the restaurant, I couldn't place him. "Are you seeing anyone, Clara?" Mother asked, her voice gentle as the conversation circled back to me. "Not at the moment," I replied. My last relationship had dissolved under the weight of my unpredictable travel schedule and the secrets I had to keep. Dating was a logistical and emotional challenge that I hadn't yet managed to solve. "Well, Amelia's colleague, Richard, is recently divorced," Mother offered. "He's a tax attorney, a lovely man, with a beautiful boat." Uncle Robert chimed in with his own well-intentioned but misguided advice. "Have you considered an MBA? A business degree could open up so many doors. It's never too late to get serious about a career." I smiled politely, recalling the time I had anonymously consulted for his investment firm, briefing their top partners on how to identify forgeries in a potential art acquisition portfolio. A consultation for which his firm had paid my foundation a handsome 5-figure fee. The conversation drifted to other topics, and I began to relax, sinking into the familiar comfort of my invisibility. I let myself enjoy the perfectly seared scallops of my main course as the family discussed politics, local development, and Daniel's upcoming trip to a tech conference in Lisbon. Then I saw him again. The young sommelier. He was staring right at me, his eyes wide with dawning recognition. And in that instant, it clicked. Leo. The brilliant, slightly starstruck in turn from the Uffizi. As he started walking towards our table, his expression a mixture of awe and excitement. I felt the carefully separated plates of my two worlds begin to tremble, threatening to collide. The wine steward had just finished a lengthy description of a Bordeaux vintage when Amelia leaned across the table, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "The Wagyu beef looks incredible," she said, then glanced at me with a theatrical sigh. "It's $150, though. Is that in your budget, Clara, or should we just add it to Dad's tab?" The familiar sting of her words was blunted by years of practice. "I'll be fine, Amelia." "Nonsense," Father declared with benevolent authority. "I'll take care of Clara's meal. It's no trouble." He said it as if he were bestowing a great charity, as if I were a struggling student and not a self-sufficient woman in her 30s. Mother's smile tightened at the edges, her silent discomfort a language I knew well. Her unwillingness to challenge these small, continuous dismissals was a cornerstone of our family dynamic. "Very generous, Uncle James," Daniel said with a chuckle. "University salaries being what they are. What do they pay you these days, Clara? Is it enough to cover your student loans and avocado toast?" I smiled, a placid mask. "The compensation is fair." "Fair," Amelia repeated, savoring the word as if it were a cheap wine. "How dreadfully boring. My bonus this year will likely be more than your entire annual salary." I took a slow, deliberate sip of water. I saw Leo hovering nearby, pouring wine at another table but clearly trying to catch my eye. I gave a subtle shake of my head, a silent plea for him to keep his distance. The last thing I needed was for him to compromise years of carefully maintained cover. Uncle Robert, seizing the opportunity to pontificate, launched into one of his favorite subjects. "It's the problem with academia and these nonprofits, full of well-meaning people with no real-world ambition. No offense, Clara, but it's the doers and the builders who move society forward." "Preserving cultural heritage is also a way of moving society forward," I countered mildly, thinking of the ancient Syrian artifacts my team had rescued from a war zone last year. In a manner of speaking, Uncle Robert conceded, unconvinced. "But it doesn't exactly drive the economy, does it?" Daniel, surprisingly, offered a partial defense. "Come on, Uncle Robert. Not everything is about the economy. Some of that historical stuff is cool, like ancient code breaking." Speaking of ancient, Amelia cut in, changing the subject with surgical precision. "I saw your car parked out front, Clara. Is that the same little Toyota you had in college? It must be 15 years old." The Toyota was my personal car, chosen for its reliability and its utter lack of distinction. My foundation-issued Land Rover, equipped with discreet armor plating and advanced communication gear, was parked in the private garage of my carriage house. "It runs perfectly," I said. "I could co-sign a loan for you on something more professional," Father offered, his tone suggesting my vehicle was a personal affront to the Vance family name. "A woman your age needs to project a certain image." I resisted the urge to explain that my image was a professional tool, designed for blending in, not standing out. "How's the dating life for an archivist?" Aunt Carol asked, her segues as subtle as a foghorn. "Any interesting prospects, or is it all tweed jackets and elbow patches?" I thought of my last date, a charming Interpol agent I'd met in Rome. Our whirlwind romance had lasted until our jurisdictions diverged. "No one's serious right now," I said. "You can't wait forever, dear," Aunt Carol advised. "A woman's prime is a fleeting thing." At your age, I was already chairing the junior league and had 2 children. Mother, sensing my patience wearing thin, tried to redirect. "Clara has her career. It's a different world now." "Career might be a generous term," Amelia murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. My jaw tightened, but I held my composure. Years of negotiating with guarded curators and dangerous black marketeers had taught me a level of self-control my sister could only dream of. My gaze drifted past her, and I saw Leo again. This time he was speaking with an older, impeccably dressed gentleman, gesturing discreetly in my direction. My breath caught. I recognized the man instantly, Monsieur Dubois, the restaurant's owner. He was a renowned collector of antique maps. Last year, I had helped him recover a priceless 16th century portolan chart that had been stolen from his private library. My focus snapped back to the table as Father's voice cut through my thoughts. Have you at least started a retirement fund, Clara? At your income level, every penny counts. You must be disciplined. Before I could reply, Amelia leaned in. I doubt she has much left over after rent and utilities. Which reminds me, Clara, I know an excellent recruiter. She specializes in placing people in corporate support roles. The executive assistant to our firm's managing partner is retiring. It's a highly respected position. The image of me, scheduling Amelia's boss's meetings while I was meant to be coordinating a recovery operation in Cairo, was so absurd it was almost funny. I appreciate the thought, I said, my voice dangerously calm, but I am content where I am. Content, Father repeated, the word sour on his tongue. Vances are not raised to be content, Clara. We are raised to lead. I saw Leo approaching, a bottle of wine in his hand, his steps full of purpose. Monsieur Dubois was watching from across the room, a small, knowing smile on his face. I have my own way of leading, I said softly, just as Leo arrived at our table. The moment had arrived, uninvited and unstoppable. Leo approached our table not with the deference of a trainee, but with the bright, shining reverence of a disciple. His eyes met mine, and his face broke into a wide, unguarded smile. Ms. Vance, he exclaimed, his voice carrying across the quiet alcove. It is an incredible honor to see you again. I have your favorite, a Gavy di Gavy, from the Piedmont region, just as you taught me. A profound and sudden silence fell over our table. I watched, as if in slow motion, the wave of shock ripple across the faces of my family. Father, who had been lifting his water glass, froze, his hand suspended in midair. Amelia's perfectly sculpted smile dissolved, replaced by a slack-jawed gape. Mother's hand flew to her pearls, her carefully maintained composure shattering like fine crystal. Daniel's confident smirk was wiped clean, his expression a blank slate of pure confusion. Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert simply stared, their mouths slightly agape. Thank you, Leo, I managed, my voice steady despite the frantic pounding in my chest. That's very thoughtful. Leo, completely unaware of the domestic drama he had just ignited, beamed with pride. The entire staff at the Uffizi still tells the story of how you identified the forgery in the Medici Gospels just by the pigment composition in the illuminations. It was legendary. Father's water glass landed on the table with a thud. Mother began fanning herself with her napkin, her eyes fixed on me. Is the new security protocol for the Laurentian Library fully implemented? Leo continued, pouring the wine with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a shared passion. I read the paper you published on artifact tracking using isotope signatures. It was brilliant. Leo, I said, my voice gentle but firm, perhaps we can catch up another time. Oh, he said, the light in his eyes dimming as he finally registered the stunned faces around the table. Oh, my goodness. I am so sorry, Ms. Vance. I shouldn't have. This is a private dinner. My apologies. He blushed a deep crimson, his professionalism suddenly returning. It's quite all right, I assured him, though it was anything but. Thank you for the wine. Leo nodded, mortified, and retreated from the table with the haste of a man fleeing a burning building. The ensuing silence was so thick I could feel it pressing in on me. 8 pairs of eyes were trained on me, their expressions a cocktail of disbelief, bewilderment, and dawning suspicion. Amelia found her voice first. Ms. Vance, she whispered, the name sounding foreign and absurd on her lips. I work for the Monuments and Heritage Foundation, I said, deciding that the truth, or at least a part of it, was now the only option. My official title is Field Agent for Art and Antiquities Recovery. Father finally spoke, his voice raspy. But you said, the university library. I said I was an archival assistant. I corrected him gently. It was a cover story. Necessary for my work. Cover story? Uncle Robert sputtered. You mean like a spy? Not exactly a spy, I clarified. But discretion is a significant part of the job. The Medici Gospels, Daniel said slowly, the words clicking into place. I saw that on the news. They said an anonymous foundation helped the Italian government recover them from a private collection in Monaco. That was you. My team and I, yes. Amelia's shock was hardening into disbelief. This is a joke. You paid that boy to say all that? Before I could respond, Monsieur Dubois, the owner, glided to our table. He exuded an old-world elegance that made my family sit up a little straighter. Ms. Vance, he said, his voice a smooth baritone. He bowed his head slightly in a gesture of respect. I hope my young sommelier did not disturb you. He is a great admirer of your work. Not at all, Monsieur Dubois, I replied. It's good to see you. And you, he said, his eyes twinkling. I must thank you again for your assistance with my little map problem last year. The Portolan chart is now the centerpiece of my collection, right where it belongs. Father was staring from me to Monsieur Dubois and back again, his mind visibly struggling to process the new information. Your meal this evening is, of course, on the house, Ms. Vance, Monsieur Dubois continued. A small token of my immense gratitude. The preservation of our shared history is a noble cause, and you are its finest champion. That's truly not necessary, I protested. I insist, he said with a final, charming smile. He gave a slight bow to my stunned family. Enjoy your evening. As he walked away, a new silence fell, this one filled not with confusion, but with a dawning, seismic understanding. What map problem? Michael asked, his voice filled with a genuine curiosity I hadn't heard from him in years. Just as I was about to formulate a discreet answer, my phone vibrated on the table. It was a specific, coded buzz, the signal from my director in London. I glanced at the screen, a single encrypted symbol that meant an operation was in progress and required my immediate attention. Excuse me, I said, standing. I have to take this. I walked a few paces away, into the shadows of the garden alcove, knowing full well that my entire family was watching my every move, straining to hear every word. Vance, I answered quietly. Clara, said the voice of my director, Sir Richard. The package is moving. It's left the Geneva Freeport. Our contact confirms it's en route to the private airfield. Do we intercept at the airstrip or wait for it to reach the buyer? I looked back at my family, at their bewildered faces, at the elegant meal now completely forgotten. Hold at the airfield, I instructed. I want eyes on the buyer. Confirm identity before we move in. I'll be on a secure line in 20 minutes. Have the Swiss team on standby. Understood. 20 minutes. I ended the call and returned to my seat. The power dynamic at the table had not just shifted, it had been completely inverted. I apologize, I said, taking my seat. A work issue. Was that? Amelia began, her voice barely a whisper. A real operation. Yes. We're tracking a stolen antiquity. I took a sip of the gavy that Leo had poured. It was, as he'd said, excellent. All this time, Father said, his voice thick with emotion, while we thought you were just filing papers. You were recovering priceless artifacts all over the world, Mother finished, her eyes shining with a mixture of tears and wonder. I looked at their faces, the family who had pitied me, dismissed me, and so profoundly misunderstood me, and felt a strange and complicated ache. It was partly vindication, yes, but it was also a form of grief for the years of authentic connection we had lost. Yes, I said. I was. I don't believe it, Amelia said, shaking her head as if to clear it. Show me. Do you have an ID card or something? I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then reached into my clutch. I pulled out my foundation ID, a simple, discreet card with my photo, my name, and the MHF crest. I slid it across the table to her. Her perfectly manicured hand trembled as she picked it up. Clara Vance, she read aloud, her voice strained. Field Agent, Art and Antiquities Recovery. Father took the card from her, his gaze sweeping over it, searching for any sign of falsehood. "This looks official," he conceded, passing it to Daniel. "It is," I confirmed, retrieving the card after its journey around the table. I was recruited in my final year of college. The director of my art history program was a former consultant for the foundation. He recommended me. "But you never told us," Mother said, the hurt in her voice palpable. "All these years, Clara." "Why?" "There were reasons," I said. "Professional discretion is the most important one." "Professional discretion," Uncle Robert repeated, the words sounding different now, imbued with weight and importance. "My God, Clara. You're like something out of a movie." "It's not quite that glamorous," I said with a small smile. "It's mostly research, paperwork, and dealing with bureaucracy. But it has its moments." "The Uffizi Gallery," Daniel said, his eyes wide with a newfound respect. "And Monaco. And you were just in the Swiss Alps, weren't you?" "How did you know that?" I asked, surprised. "Your rested look," he said. "You get a certain tan in high altitudes that you don't get at the beach." I saw it on my climbing buddies all the time. I looked at my brother, truly looked at him, and saw not just the tech genius, but an observant young man I barely knew. My phone buzzed again, a short, sharp vibration. The operation was moving faster than anticipated. "I'm so sorry," I said, standing up and gathering my things. "I have to leave. The situation I was just briefed on has escalated." "Of course," Father said immediately, rising from his chair, an uncharacteristic gesture of respect. "You have to go." "Is it dangerous?" Mother asked, her voice laced with a new and genuine anxiety. "This part of the operation is about logistics and coordination," I assured her. "I'll be safe." I thought of the time I'd been held at gunpoint in a St. Petersburg warehouse and decided now was not the time to share that particular memory. "All this time," Amelia said, her voice filled with a stunned self-recrimination, "we treated you like you were nothing." The word hung in the air, a ghost of 1,000 small cuts and condescending remarks. "I know what you thought," I said, my voice soft but clear. "And in a way, it was the perfect cover. No one looks twice at the person everyone underestimates." A waiter arrived with an elaborate dessert platter, a gift from Monsieur Dubois. I politely declined, explaining again that I had to leave. "But we have so much to talk about," Mother protested. "We will," I promised, squeezing her hand. "I'll call you tomorrow." As I turned to leave, Father stepped forward. "Clara," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. We. "It's okay, Dad," I said, and was surprised to find that I meant it. "We'll talk." As I walked through the elegant dining room of the Cypress Room, nodding a quiet farewell to Monsieur Dubois, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The burden of being misunderstood, of playing a part, was gone. My Foundation-issued phone buzzed again. The operation in Switzerland was waiting. Agent Vance was on her way. Behind me, I left a table of shocked relatives, the quiet hum of their collapsing worldview almost audible, as they began to see me, for the very first time, as I truly was. The following Saturday, I drove my old Toyota to my parents' house south of Broad. The invitation had come via a phone call from my mother, her voice hesitant and full of a new deference. When I pulled into the crushed shell driveway, I saw Amelia's sleek black Lexus and Daniel's silver Porsche parked near the piazza. The familiar sight no longer sparked the same old feelings of inadequacy. It was just what they drove. Mother opened the heavy cypress door before I reached it, pulling me into a hug that felt warmer and less formal than her usual embraces. "Clara, thank you for coming," she said, her eyes searching my face as if looking for clues she had missed for the past decade. They were all waiting in the formal sitting room, the one reserved for important guests. Father was in his wingback chair, Amelia and Daniel on the damask sofa. The air was thick with unspoken words. It felt less like a family gathering and more like a diplomatic summit. Clara, father began, standing as I entered. This new custom still felt strange. Please sit. I chose a small armchair, placing my bag beside it, and waited. The silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. We owe you an apology, father said at last, his voice the sober tone he used to reserve for delivering a verdict. All of us. For 8 years, mother added, her voice trembling slightly, we thought. Well, we know what we thought. We were wrong. So terribly wrong. I took a breath, choosing my words with the same care I used when negotiating for a priceless artifact. I appreciate that. But I think it's important to understand why it happened. You kept a secret from us, Amelia said, a hint of her old defensiveness in her tone. I did, I acknowledged. Initially, it was for professional reasons. My work requires a great deal of discretion. But after a while, I paused, letting my gaze sweep over each of them. It became about something else. What? Daniel asked, leaning forward, his curiosity genuine. It was easier to let you believe I was unremarkable than to fight against the narrative you had all created for me, I said plainly. The narrative of the Vances was that Amelia was the brilliant lawyer, Daniel was the tech genius, and I was the quiet, unambitious one who needed looking after. The truth of the statement landed in the silent room. No one refuted it. We were only trying to help, mother said softly. Were you? I asked, my voice gentle but firm. Or were you reinforcing your own roles? It's comfortable to have someone to pity. It makes your own successes seem even greater by comparison. Amelia flinched, a subtle but telling reaction. Do you remember my graduation? I asked, looking at my father. You told your friend on the phone that you hoped I would find a suitable husband since a career didn't seem to be in the cards. You never asked me about my thesis, the one that got me noticed by the foundation. Father's face flushed with a dull, red shame. I don't recall saying that. I do, I said quietly. And Amelia, at Christmas, you gave me a book titled Dress for Success, telling me it was time I started projecting a more professional image. At the time, I had just returned from negotiating the return of 3 stolen paintings from a Russian oligarch. I felt plenty professional. Amelia looked down at her hands. I was just trying to share what I'd learned. No, I countered, shaking my head. You were trying to mold me into a version of you because you couldn't comprehend a version of success that looked different from your own. She's right, Daniel said unexpectedly. We had you in a box. It never even occurred to us that you might not be in the box. The whole time, I continued, my voice steady, I was building a life that I am deeply proud of. I've recovered artifacts from 12 different countries. I've worked with the world's leading historians and preservationists. I have a network of colleagues who trust me with their lives and with irreplaceable pieces of human history. Mother's eyes were wide with unshed tears. We never knew. We never gave you the chance to tell us. You never asked the right questions. I corrected her gently. You asked about my apartment, my car, my dating life. You never asked, Clara, what are you passionate about? What makes you feel alive? The question hung in the air, a quiet indictment of 1,000 missed opportunities. Father cleared his throat, his lawyerly instincts taking over. This job of yours, is it financially stable? It was such a typical question for him, yet this time it felt less like a judgment and more like a genuine attempt to understand. It is, I confirmed. The foundation believes in compensating its agents for the risks they take and the skills they possess. My carriage house is paid off. My retirement portfolio is in excellent shape. Your carriage house? Amelia looked up, confused. I thought you rented that little place on King Street. That was a mail drop, I admitted. A convenient fiction. A new wave of shock rippled through the room. This secret was somehow more personal, more telling, than the job itself. We have been fools, Father said, the words heavy with resignation. Arrogant, blind fools. You weren't fools, I said. You were just looking at the wrong picture. The question is, are you willing to look at the right one now? Yes, Mother whispered, reaching a hand out to me. Oh, yes, Clara. Later that afternoon, after the emotional storm had passed and we were tentatively navigating this new terrain, Amelia asked if we could speak alone. We walked into the walled garden, the air fragrant with the heavy perfume of gardenias. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice stripped of its usual corporate confidence. Something I've never admitted to anyone. I waited, listening to the gentle splash of the fountain. I'm miserable, she confessed, the words tumbling out. My job, it's all I have, and I hate it. The endless hours, the backstabbing, the pressure. I feel like I'm a ghost haunting my own life. I was stunned into silence. Amelia, the golden child, the pinnacle of success, was unhappy. When I saw you at that restaurant, she continued, and that boy and then Monsieur Dubois were looking at you with such reverence. After the shock, I felt this profound, gut-wrenching jealousy. Not of the adventure, but of the purpose. Your life means something, Clara. You're saving history. I'm helping corporations avoid taxes. For the first time, I saw my sister not as a rival or a judge, but as a person, trapped in a gilded cage she had helped build for herself. It's not too late to find your own purpose, I said softly. Isn't it? She asked, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. I'm a 35-year-old junior partner. This is my path. A path isn't a prison, I said. You have a brilliant legal mind, Amelia. Imagine what you could do if you pointed it at something you actually believed in. She looked at me, a flicker of something new, hope, perhaps, in her eyes. You really think so? I know so, I said. You just have to be brave enough to take the first step off the path. As we walked back to the house, a fragile, tentative bridge was forming between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was something more delicate, more promising, the beginning of understanding. The old Vance family hierarchy was gone, shattered on the floor of the Cypress room. I didn't know what would grow in its place, but for the first time, I felt a sense of hope that it might be something real. 3 months later, the scent of roasting rosemary and garlic filled my carriage house. I was hosting Sunday dinner, an event that would have been unthinkable in my previous life. My family, now familiar with my real home, moved through the space with a newfound ease. They admired the exposed brick walls, the collection of antique maps on the wall, all legitimate, I assured them, and the artifacts from my travels that I no longer had to hide. This place has so much character, Clara, Mother said, running a hand over the rough-hewn mantelpiece. It's so, you. It was the highest compliment she could give. Father was studying a framed photograph of my team standing in front of a recently recovered mosaic in Tunisia. Tell me about this one again, he said, his interest genuine. Who was the man on the far right? That's Dr. Al-Jamil, I explained. The leading expert on Roman-era African mosaics. We couldn't have authenticated it without him. The conversation was easy, a comfortable flow of questions and stories. Daniel asked for my advice on a security issue for his new app. Mother talked about taking a pottery class, a passion she'd given up when she married. The changes were real, woven into the fabric of our new interactions. Amelia arrived last, looking less like a corporate warrior and more like herself. She had left her high-powered firm and had taken a position with a nonprofit that provided legal aid to immigrants. Sorry I'm late, she said, handing me a bottle of wine. We had a breakthrough on an asylum case. The exhaustion in her eyes was tinged with a deep, unfamiliar satisfaction. As we gathered around the long, rustic farm table in my dining area, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The shift in my family had been profound. It had not come easily. It had been forged in difficult, honest conversations and a mutual willingness to dismantle the past. I have to thank you, Clara, Amelia said, raising her glass during dinner. You showed me that success isn't a competition. It's about building a life of meaning. And you showed me what courage looks like, I replied, meeting her gaze. Later, as they were leaving, Father pulled me aside at the door. I'm proud of you, Clara, he said, his voice quiet. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. You had the strength to be yourself even when we gave you every reason not to. After they were gone, I stood in the warm silence of my home, a place that was a true reflection of my soul. The journey hadn't just been about them seeing me, it had been about me allowing myself to be seen. I had learned that hiding, even for good reasons, comes at a cost. The greatest freedom isn't in the secret you keep, but in the truth you're brave enough to share. The most valuable relationships are not the ones that require you to be smaller, but the ones that make space for you to be whole. The revelation in the Cypress Room was not the end of the story, but the beginning. It was the catalyst for a harder, quieter, and more meaningful recovery project, the reclamation of a family. In the end, it turned out that the most precious artifact I would ever help bring back into the light was the authentic, complicated, and beautiful truth of who we were. Have you ever felt defined by someone else's limited view of you? Or have you ever had a moment of revelation that changed a relationship forever? I invite you to share your own stories of being seen, or of learning to see someone else, in the comments below. Your experience could be a beacon for someone else navigating a similar path. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing for more reflections on life's quiet transformations. Thank you for sharing this space with me. Remember, the most important journey is the one we take back to our truest selves and to each other.